They told us the stars were empty, cold, silent, dead. We believed them. For centuries, we stared up at the sky and saw only twinkling lights, burning spheres too far to touch, too ancient to matter. They said Earth was all we had, that humanity was alone in a void without meaning or purpose. That we were the anomaly, the miracle, the accident. But we thought wrong. It started with the pulse, a low frequency signal from Proxima Centauri, buried deep beneath layers of cosmic noise, dismissed as radiation, ignored until it repeated, not once, not twice, but in prime numbers, mathematics, intent, intelligence. NASA denied it, the UN classified it. Billionaires built rockets to escape it. But truth has a way of surviving censorship. And when the world learned what that signal translated to, those 3 words, it was already too late. We are awake. That's what they said, not hello, not peace, just that. Panic gripped the world. Satellites went silent. Power grids blinked. The International Space Station vanished without a distress call, leaving only a scorched path across the sky. And then came the rain. Not water, not fire, but ash. Falling from clear skies, ash that whispered names, our names. The invasion didn't come in ships or armies. It came in dreams. People began to wake with memories that weren't theirs. Memories of planets orbiting black suns, of creatures made of thought and light, of wars that never ended. Children were born with glowing eyes. Some animals stopped casting shadows. Our oceans began to boil from within. And then, we remembered, not discovered, not learned, remembered, because humanity wasn't Earth born. We weren't the children of this planet. We were its prisoners, exiled from a war that tore across galaxies, our minds erased, our truths buried. Earth wasn't our home, it was our cage. The signal wasn't a warning. It was a key, and the moment we remembered what we are, we changed. Some of us evolved, some of us disintegrated. Language collapsed, time bent. The laws of physics started asking questions of their own. And above us, the stars blinked, not because they were shining, but because something behind them had opened its eyes. We looked up, finally understanding what we were never meant to remember. We are not alone. We never were, and now they know that we know. We thought the void was empty. We thought wrong. We were told the stars were just lights, distant, burning dots in a cold, empty sky. Nothing out there. Just silence, just space, and for the longest time we believed it. We looked up night after night, thinking Earth was all we had, that we were alone, a cosmic accident drifting in the dark. But the truth, we thought wrong. It started quiet, a strange pulse from deep space. Proxima Centauri, barely noticeable, buried in static. The kind of thing scientists wave off as background noise, until it repeated. A pattern, prime numbers, not nature, not random. It was a message, and when it finally got decoded, it was 3 words: we are awake. Not a greeting, not a warning, just a fact, and somehow that was worse. The world froze, government denied, agencies locked it down, the media spun it, but something had already shifted. Satellites went offline, power grids flickered, the space station vanished like smoke. And then came the ash, falling from blue skies. Ash that whispered our names as it touched the ground. People thought it was the end, but it was just the beginning, because the invasion didn't come with warships. It came in dreams, in memories, people waking up with visions of other worlds, of strange wars, of things that should be impossible. Children born with glowing eyes, oceans bubbling like they remembered a different tide. And then we remembered, not learned, remembered. We weren't born here. We were sent here, banished, locked away. Earth wasn't home. It was a prison built to make us forget who we were, what we were. That signal, it wasn't a threat. It was a key. And the second we remembered, everything changed. Time bent. Language broke. Reality started to glitch like it knew it was running out of time. And the stars, they blinked, not because they were shining, but because something behind them had finally opened its eyes, watching, waiting. We looked up and realized we were never alone. We just didn't remember, but now we do. And so do they. We thought the sky was quiet. We thought wrong. Here are the 10 most viral, emotionally dramatic key points pulled from your speech we thought wrong. Designed for maximum audience engagement and shareability. Perfect for trailers, narration, or promo content. 1. The stars lied to us. We believed the sky was silent, cold, and empty. But silence was never safety. It was strategy. 2. The signal wasn't noise. It was a wake-up call from something ancient, intelligent, and far beyond human comprehension. 3. We are awake. Just 3 words, but they shattered everything we thought we knew about the universe and ourselves. 4. This wasn't an invasion. It was a reminder. The threat wasn't coming from the outside. It was already inside us, waiting to be remembered. 5. Earth was never home. It was a prison, a cage, a cosmic lie designed to keep us asleep and unaware of what we truly are. 6. We didn't discover the truth. We remembered it. And that was the most terrifying part, because it means we were never human to begin with. 7. They didn't attack our world. They rewrote our reality. Dreams twisted. Time warped. Children were born with eyes that glowed like stars. 8. The signal was the key, and when we unlocked it, the universe blinked, not because it saw us, but because we saw it back. 9. We were never alone. We were just blind, programmed. Now that we remember, they're watching again. 10. We thought wrong, about the stars, about our past, about what's real, and now, there's no going back. Let me know if you'd like these turned into dramatic voiceover lines, video captions, or trailer. They told us the stars were nothing but distant suns. Burning balls of gas flung across an empty sky, too far to touch, too old to matter. We believed it. We were raised to. From textbooks to telescopes, every piece of knowledge reinforced the same quiet idea, that the universe was vast, indifferent, and silent. It was a comfort, in a way. The silence gave us permission to be alone. It allowed us to believe Earth was rare, that life here was an accident, and that nothing out there was watching. We looked up with wonder, but never with fear. The stars twinkled like decoration, like background noise for our short, busy lives. They were beauty, not danger, infinity, not memory. And so we wrapped our dreams in constellations and told ourselves stories of gods and galaxies, always with the assumption that nothing was truly out there. Not really, but the sky was never silent. The quiet we trusted wasn't peace, it was suppression. Something had muffled the hum, had dimmed the echoes, had blurred the signals that should have been obvious. We thought we were hearing nothing when we were really being deafened by design. A filter had been placed between us and the stars. Not a technological barrier, but something deeper, something inside us. A veil, a lock, something that kept our instincts from twitching when we should have sensed danger. The warning signs were always there. The ancient myths that lined up too well with distant planets we only just discovered. The symmetrical ruins buried beneath polar ice. The way human DNA carries patterns, structures, that don't seem to come from any known evolutionary path. But we ignored all that, called it coincidence. Pseudoscience, fringe, we were trained to be blind, so when the signal came, no one noticed it at first. A pulse buried in background radiation from Proxima Centauri, looping gently, so faint it was almost apologetic. The machines caught it, but the scientists shrugged. It didn't fit any known threat. It was too orderly to be random, too subtle to be natural, but also too simple to be a warning, until it repeated. Not once, not twice, but in a rhythm, prime numbers, intent. And intent is what changed everything, because that meant someone, or something, was out there, and it had been trying to wake us. The moment it was decoded, the panic began. Governments clamped down, the data was redacted, buried, dismissed as atmospheric interference. But the truth had already leaked through the cracks, and those 3 words, they spread like wildfire. We are awake. Not a greeting, not an invitation, a declaration, a line in the sand. It wasn't just that something else existed. It was that we had been noticed, or maybe remembered, and whatever had sent the message, it wasn't reaching out for the first time. It was returning. The calm we'd lived in for centuries wasn't safety. It was sedation. We hadn't been free, we'd been isolated, quarantined from the rest of the cosmos, not to protect us from it, but to protect it from us. Because something about us wasn't supposed to wake up. Something was locked away on purpose. And the stars, they were never just lights. They were markers, warnings, or worse, sentinels. We used to gaze up at them and dream. About love, about escape, about meaning. But now they felt different. Heavy, watching, not stars but eyes. We hadn't been alone. We'd been observed, studied, remembered. What made it all worse was that we didn't feel invaded. We felt recognized, like someone had stepped into the room and said, "There you are." And some part of us answered. That's when the world started to unravel. Satellites stopped responding, as if they had been speaking a language Earth no longer understood. Entire regions lost power, but not in blackout patterns. More like selective silencing, strategic erasure. We thought it was a cyber attack, but it wasn't coming from Earth. Then came the ash, not from volcanoes, not from bombs, just falling soft as snow from clear blue skies. And the strange thing wasn't how it drifted. It was how it whispered. It said names. People heard their own names in the falling ash. Spoken in voices they didn't recognize, in accents that didn't exist, from mouths that weren't human. And still, we told ourselves it was panic, mass psychosis, fear turning into illusion. But that was just denial trying to survive one more day. The truth had already broken through, and deep down we felt it. The stars weren't distant, they were close, too close, and they had always been. It was never about first contact. It was about remembering the last one. We weren't looking into space, we were looking into memory, our own. The stars were never maps to other places. They were triggers, coordinates in our minds, buried for safety, or maybe for control. We were the vault. And now it had been opened. The signal didn't awaken them. It awakened us. And now the sky feels different. Not because it's changed, but because we have. We thought the stars were quiet. We thought wrong. The signal didn't sound like anything special. It wasn't loud or dramatic. No thunder from the heavens. Just a soft, pulsing beat buried deep in the static hum of space. A whisper from Proxima Centauri, barely there. Like a heartbeat trying to make itself heard across the void. And at first, nobody paid attention. Not really. It was dismissed as background radiation, solar interference, another meaningless anomaly in the endless noise of the cosmos. But then it repeated. It didn't just echo, it counted. Prime numbers, not natural, not random. Someone, or something, had built it, structured it, and that meant intelligence, intent, communication. When that realization hit, it wasn't excitement that followed. It was dread, because we weren't ready. We'd told ourselves for centuries that we wanted contact, that we longed for proof we weren't alone. But when that proof came, it didn't arrive as a hand reaching out. It arrived as a cold fact. We are awake. That was the message. 3 words, no context, no emotion, but it hit like a thunderclap through the scientific community. People wanted to believe it was benign. A greeting, maybe. A declaration of awareness from some ancient race just now noticing us. But deep down, we knew better. It didn't feel like discovery. It felt like memory, like something inside us recognized the signal, not in our minds, but in our bones, in our blood. A shiver ran through the world that couldn't be explained. Some people cried for no reason, others collapsed, and some just stared at the sky as if waiting for something to return. And then they did, not with ships, not with weapons, but with dreams. It started slowly. Flickers in sleep, people began dreaming in languages they didn't know, seeing places that didn't exist, deserts with no stars, towers that bent gravity, oceans that breathed, and then those dreams spread. They linked. People who had never met began describing the same places, the same creatures, the same war. It was like a hidden part of humanity had been switched back on. What we thought were dreams weren't dreams at all. They were memories. We weren't alone. We were never alone. We just didn't remember because something or someone made sure we forgot. Earth wasn't our beginning, it was our reset. A planet chosen not for its beauty or resources, but for its isolation. The perfect cage. We were placed here, memory wiped, evolution altered, history rewritten, and that signal, it was the key, a trigger carefully timed, a cosmic alarm clock, and it had just gone off. The signal didn't invite contact. It opened the floodgates. The moment we received it, our world began to unravel, not from invasion, but from within, because the truth was never out there floating in the stars. It was always buried inside us, waiting. Now people are changing. They speak in voices not their own. They write symbols they've never learned. Some glow under certain skies. Others bend metal without touching it. The laws we thought were unbreakable, they're being broken, and reality is starting to notice. Physics is stuttering, time is warping, and across the sky, the stars are shifting, not moving, but blinking. Like eyes that had been shut for far too long. And now they're opening. The sky no longer feels like space. It feels like memory, like presence, and whatever sent that signal, it hasn't just made contact. It's come to collect. We didn't uncover the truth, we remembered it, and that's what terrifies us most. We thought the message came from the stars. We thought wrong. It didn't happen all at once. That's what made it more terrifying. The change crept in quietly, like a fog rolling across the edges of the world, subtle and impossible to stop. It started with dreams, strange, vivid, electric. People saw things they couldn't explain. Skies with more than one moon, cities made of glass that breathed, names that felt too familiar, even though they had never been spoken aloud before. And then came the memories, not fragments of childhood or flashes from another life, but something deeper, something not quite human. People began to remember things they had never lived. Wars fought across the void, empires falling into black holes, beings made of frequency, thought, and flame. Whole civilizations dying to protect a secret buried in the heart of time. And always, always, the stars watching silently above it all. Doctors called it mass psychosis. The media called it the sleep wave. Governments panicked. The world tried to medicate the visions away, to contain what was unraveling. But it didn't work, because the more we tried to suppress it, the louder the memories became. And then the children started speaking, not English, not Urdu, not Mandarin or Arabic, but something else. Something that made radios crackle and glass vibrate. Something that bent light and slowed sound. Something that shouldn't exist. Linguists had no explanation. The words didn't follow any structure, any rhythm, yet everyone who heard them understood. And the words weren't new. They were old, too old, like echoes from a time before language had a name. Then came the reflections. People began seeing things in mirrors, flashes of themselves, but different. Not older, not younger, just other, wearing armor, covered in strange symbols, staring back with eyes that didn't quite belong to this world. Some broke the mirrors. Others couldn't look away. A few began answering back. And the oceans, God, the oceans, they began to move differently, not just in tides, but in temperament, as if they remembered a rhythm we'd forgotten. Fishermen spoke of sounds under the waves, voices humming ancient lullabies. Entire schools of fish swam in perfect geometric patterns, forming symbols only those who had been dreaming recognized. And above it all, the stars were shifting. No scientist could prove it. The constellations remained the same. But anyone with eyes could feel it. They no longer looked like distant suns. They felt close, too close, watching. People stopped seeing them as lights. They started seeing them as eyes, because this wasn't contact. It was recognition. The truth wasn't something we were discovering. It was something waking up inside of us. We weren't evolving. We were reverting, returning to something we had once been, something that had been buried deep inside our species like a second spine. And now that it had been triggered, we could feel it in our skin, in our bones, in our breath. Some began to change, subtle at first. A different way of seeing color, a pulse that didn't match their heartbeat, a resistance to gravity, a voice in their head that didn't sound foreign. It sounded like home. Others weren't so lucky. Some disintegrated under the pressure of memory. Their minds couldn't hold the weight of what they used to be. They whispered warnings before they fell apart, warnings in languages no one had spoken in a million years, about the war, about them, because the memories weren't just returning, so were the enemies tied to them. And they weren't far, they were waiting, watching. The signal didn't just wake us, it lit a beacon, and now, they know we remember. We thought our dreams were just dreams. We thought wrong. They said it was a myth, this idea that Earth wasn't really home. A poetic thought, maybe, something for dreamers and sci-fi novelists, but not science, not real. We were taught to believe in evolution, in chaos turned order, in chance sculpting consciousness over millions of years. We were told humanity was born here, carved by this soil, this gravity, this sun. This was our origin, but deep inside, something never fit. It wasn't just the question science couldn't answer. It was the feeling. The way we looked at the stars, not with curiosity, but ache. The way ancient civilizations, oceans apart, described beings from the sky, always the sky. The way we built monuments not to Earth, but toward the heavens, as if we were trying to remember where we came from. And now we know why. We weren't born here, we were placed here, not as pioneers, not as colonists, but as prisoners. That truth didn't come with a bang. It came quietly, through the dreams, through the signal, through the memories, slipping back like light, through cracks in a wall. Earth was not our beginning. It was a reset, a controlled environment, a lie dressed as a home. Our ancestors weren't cavemen. They were soldiers, scientists, exiles from a war so vast, so reality breaking. It tore across dimensions and left no survivors. Only fugitives, us. We were hidden here, memories wiped, souls sealed. The cost of survival was forgetting who we were. And we paid it. For thousands of years we forgot, we adapted, we grew. We became something smaller, something slower, something manageable. We learned to fear the sky. We called the unknown God, and then argued over his name. We built borders, we killed wonder, all of it was part of the design, until that signal came, until the stars whispered us awake. Now everything is shifting. You can feel it, can't you? That weight in your chest when you stare into the night sky too long. That itch beneath your skin when you hear static on the radio. It's not fear, it's recognition. Your blood knows, your bones know. The cage is rusting. The lock is snapping open. Earth was never our cradle. It was our coffin. And now the dirt is peeling away, revealing what's been waiting underneath. We weren't born here. We were buried, and now we're rising. We thought Earth was home. We thought wrong. The moment of remembering didn't arrive with sirens or explosions. It arrived with a whisper, gentle, terrifying, undeniable. It wasn't discovery. It wasn't revelation. It was recognition. The kind that stirs something deep in your chest, something ancient and hidden, like a name you once knew but hadn't spoken in 1,000 lifetimes. Because the truth didn't come from the stars. It came from inside us. One by one, people began to change, not physically at first, but perceptually. They stopped asking what the signal meant. They started knowing. Not in words, but in images, in sounds, in instincts that had no origin on Earth. Memories bled through the fabric of consciousness, slow and sharp, like old film reels catching fire. People remembered things that weren't theirs, holding weapons they'd never seen, standing on soil that was never Earth, speaking to beings that didn't blink, and it wasn't chaos, it was familiar. This wasn't evolution. It was return to a self that had been stripped, sanitized, stuffed into a human body like a sword hidden in a plastic case. What we thought was humanity. It was just a shell, a skin stitched together to keep the real thing asleep. But the dream was ending. Some began to show signs, marks on their skin that glowed under moonlight, veins pulsing in unnatural rhythms. Voices layered with echoes of languages no one could trace. It was as if the body was finally sinking to its original blueprint. The illusion was collapsing. The forgotten code was reactivating. And it wasn't isolated. It spread. People miles apart started saying the same phrases in their sleep, drawing the same shapes, screaming the same names. Not human names, ours. Names that made the air vibrate when spoken. Names that didn't just describe who we were, but what we were made for. That's when time began to bend. People swore they lived entire lifetimes in the space of a single dream. Some remembered planets that had burned out billions of years ago, yet they described them in perfect detail. Others found themselves speaking to loved ones who had died decades before. Only the conversations weren't about Earth. They were about the war, the flight, the fall, and the ones who stayed behind, because not all of us were exiled. Some remained, some became them, the ones who whispered the lie, the ones who helped build the cage, the ones who sent the signal not to warn us, but to check if the lock still held, but it didn't, and now they know, because the signal didn't travel across space. It was always here, buried in the parts of us we were taught to ignore. Intuition, memory, madness, the pieces we dismissed as dreams or superstition. Those were the breadcrumbs leading back to who we used to be. Now the veil is lifting. Reality's seams are fraying. The mirror doesn't reflect. Time doesn't behave. Language loses shape. And the stars, they've stopped twinkling. They're just watching, as if waiting for us to finish waking up. And we will, because remembering isn't a choice anymore. It's a process, and it has begun. We thought truth came from looking out. We thought wrong. They didn't come with warships. No sound of thunder cracking the sky open. No gleaming alien fleets casting shadows over cities. That's what we expected. Loud, dramatic, cinematic. But that was never how they were going to return, because they didn't need weapons. They didn't need armies. They had already been here. They came in silence. Through dreams, through memory, through the soft, familiar voice inside your head that you always thought was yours. That's where they waited, not in orbit, not on some distant moon, but inside us. And once the signal triggered, they didn't have to invade. We let them in. At first it felt like a dream, the kind that clings to your skin long after you wake up. People began to remember things, not ideas, not stories, lives, whole identities, faces from stars that had no name. Wars they'd fought in, galaxies they'd died to protect, worlds that no longer existed but lived in perfect detail behind their eyes. They didn't question it, not really, because some part of them already knew. That was the power of it, how natural it felt. A man in Brazil carved glyphs into his walls without knowing how he understood the language. A girl in Kazakhstan drew maps of a solar system no telescope had ever captured. Across oceans, people described the same cathedral-shaped ship made of obsidian and light. Different countries, different cultures, the same exact memory. Something ancient had activated in us, the truth. We were never just human. That was the story, the comfort. But the moment the signal echoed through our minds, it was like someone flipped a switch buried beneath layers of DNA and time. We were waking up, and not everyone could handle it. Some broke, minds splintered, people collapsed mid-sentence, sobbing with no reason. Others stared into space for hours, unmoving, their pupils flickering like they were downloading a lifetime. Some vanished entirely, no footsteps, no trace. Just a scorched symbol left behind, etched into floorboards or walls, still humming hours after. And those who survived the remembering began to change. It wasn't physical, not at first. But something in their presence shifted. They spoke differently, moved like they were remembering gravity for the first time. Light bent around them in odd ways. Clocks ticked slower near them. Their shadows stopped matching their shapes. And when they spoke, it wasn't just to us. It was to them, the ones on the other side, the ones who had been listening, because the dreams weren't just memories. They were conversations, lessons, coordinates, instructions. We thought we were remembering our past, but we were being guided, being recruited. Some people followed the voices, walked into forests, into oceans, into deserts, and were never seen again. Others stayed behind and built strange devices from scrap, pieces that hummed with energy we couldn't trace, but that made the stars shudder. The world called it mass hysteria, but it wasn't hysteria. It was synchronization. We weren't going crazy. We were coming online. This wasn't an invasion. It was a reactivation. And by the time the governments understood what was happening, it was too late. You can't fight a memory. You can't shoot what's already living in your blood. They tried, of course. Raids, silence, threats. But every time they tried to suppress the awakening, more people slipped through. And those who disappeared, they weren't lost. They were being assembled, forming something old, something vast, something built before Earth was even dust. And they're still out there, rising in places we can't see. In the folds of space we once thought were empty. We didn't need ships to reach the stars. We are the ships. We are the message. We were the army all along. We thought invasion meant arrival. We thought wrong. 2/2, the signal wasn't just a sound. It was a mirror. The moment it reached us, it didn't speak to machines or satellites. It spoke to us, to something buried inside our species, something older than memory. The moment it pulsed through our minds, time bent, reality wavered, and everything we thought we knew began to unravel. But the most terrifying part, we didn't feel fear. We felt familiarity. People began to wake up not with terror, but with a strange calm, as if their entire life had just been a rehearsal for a role they'd forgotten how to play. They walked different, looked different, not possessed, not brainwashed, just aware. Aware of a truth their bodies had never unlearned. Some called it enlightenment. Others called it madness. But the truth was simpler. We were sinking, reactivating, returning to something we had once been. Because what the signal unlocked wasn't knowledge. It was design. We began seeing structures no one had built, hiding in plain sight. In the architecture of trees, the geometry of storms, the spiral of galaxies reflected in the patterns of our fingerprints. Everything around us, even our biology, started to make sense as part of something larger. Like puzzle pieces clicking into a map we never knew we carried, and some of us, those more attuned, could feel the network, not Wi-Fi, not electricity, but something older, a field of thought and memory connecting us all. It wasn't made of data, it was made of intention. People began to communicate without speaking. Entire conversations passed through glances, visions shared without sound, moments of perfect synchronicity, like déjà vu stretched across cities. We were waking up, together, but it wasn't random, it wasn't chaotic. It was coordinated, someone was guiding it, not controlling, shepherding, like a signal whispering through each of us, reawakening old alliances, old instincts, even old enemies. And the deeper we remembered, the more we saw that not all the voices inside us were our own. Some weren't waking up for the first time. Some were returning after waiting eons. And as the transformation spread, so did the resistance. Not from governments, not from religions, but from within. Because remembering who we truly were meant facing the things we had once done, the wars we had fought, the lives we had destroyed. We weren't just the heroes of some ancient war. We were also the reason it started. Some couldn't handle that weight. They fled their homes, abandoned their names. Some turned violent. Others fell silent. But all of us felt it. That quiet confrontation between who we thought we were and what we had once been, and through it all, the stars kept watching. But they weren't distant anymore, not indifferent, not even mysterious. They felt close, almost listening, because they weren't stars. They were windows, and behind them, just beyond the light, we could feel the presence of something waiting. Something remembering us just as we were remembering ourselves. And that presence wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel, it was curious, because now that the veil had lifted, it wasn't just us watching the stars, they were looking back. We thought connection meant understanding, we thought wrong. When the stars began to blink, truly blink, not flicker, not twinkle, but blink like eyes, the world didn't understand. Telescopes couldn't track it. Instruments recorded nothing unusual, but we felt it. Everyone did. A quiet jolt in the chest, a shiver that started in the bones, not the skin. Something primal, like being watched by something you used to know, but forgot on purpose. It wasn't the stars themselves that changed. It was our perception, as if the part of our minds that filtered out the truth had finally gone silent. The patterns we once called constellations started to rearrange themselves, not physically, but symbolically. People across the globe began sketching shapes they saw in the sky that weren't there the night before. And somehow they all drew the same thing, an eye, not one crafted by imagination or myth, not Horus, not Ra. This was different, alien, geometric, impossible. And when we looked back up, we understood why. The stars weren't there to guide us. They were there to watch us. For all of human history, we thought the sky was a backdrop, a stage upon which we played out our little stories of gods and destiny and discovery. But the truth was far colder, far stranger. The sky wasn't a backdrop. It was a ceiling, a barrier between who we thought we were and what was really out there out here. The blinking wasn't some new phenomenon. It had always been happening. We just weren't awake enough to notice. Until now. Now, when we sleep, we dream in charts. When we wake, we feel ourselves pulled not toward the ground, but upward, like gravity itself is confused, as if it remembers a different direction. A different origin, the stars don't shine anymore, they pulse, and that rhythm matches the one now beating behind our eyes, beneath our ribs, because the more we remember, the clearer it becomes. They're not just watching. They're waiting to see what we become when the remembering is complete, waiting to see whether we reclaim what we once were, or destroy ourselves trying, waiting to see if this world, this cage, this illusion, has broken us beyond repair, and maybe, just maybe, waiting to welcome us back. We thought the stars were distant. We thought wrong. It wasn't just our minds changing. It was the very framework of reality that began to twist, like something old and brittle finally cracking under the weight of truth. The world didn't feel natural anymore. Time pulsed in strange waves. Space felt loose, stretched, like a fabric being tugged from both ends. Physics stopped behaving like it used to. Clocks ticked slower in some places, faster in others. People aged differently. Gravity shifted, barely, but enough to make birds fly strange paths and oceans ripple where they shouldn't. You'd walk through a door and feel like something had followed you in, something that wasn't there before. And sometimes, it wasn't just a feeling. Buildings appeared where no blueprints existed. Whole blocks restructured themselves overnight. Streets bent to resemble ancient star maps. Reality was reconfiguring, recalibrating, remembering what it had been before Earth's rules were imposed. Because Earth, we were starting to realize, wasn't built for truth. It was built to contain it, and whatever that signal unlocked, it didn't just wake us. It woke everything. Animals stared into mirrors too long. Shadows moved without light. Some people spoke to reflections, and those reflections spoke back. The laws of what we thought was possible were no longer laws at all. They were suggestions, written by someone who was no longer in charge. People stood in the same place and saw different things. One saw a hallway, the other a staircase. The third saw a bleeding star, not metaphor, actuality. 3 realities bleeding into one. 3 truths sharing the same air. Science couldn't explain it, and the ones who tried, they vanished. Not dead, not abducted, just gone. Their names erased from databases. Their voices scrubbed from recordings, as if remembering the wrong thing, too soon, was dangerous. As if the truth had a price tag, a password, a threshold, and those brave, or broken, enough to cross it, never came back, because we weren't just recovering memory. We were tearing open the shell of the world, a shell built to suppress, to regulate, to contain a version of life small enough to control. But the moment the signal hit, that shell cracked, and through the cracks came everything we used to be. Everything the sky had tried to forget. We thought reality was stable. We thought wrong. Now they know that we know. That's the part no one wants to say out loud, but we all feel it. That low, pressing weight in the air. Like the moment you make eye contact with something you shouldn't have seen, and it smiles back. We used to be invisible, safe in our forgetfulness, silent in our cage, but the second we remembered, that silence shattered. The second we looked up with awareness instead of wonder, something looked down and recognized us. This was never about discovery. It was never about first contact. It was about confirmation, because something out there, or around us, had been waiting, not to destroy us, not even to speak, just to see what we would become when the amnesia wore off. When the lock cracked, when the exiles remembered who they were and what they had done, and now, that moment has come. We tried to reach the stars thinking we were climbing up. But the truth is, we were digging back down. Down into what was buried, into us. And now that we've touched it, that ancient signal buried in blood and breath and bone, there's no going back. They've been watching, waiting, not as enemies, not as saviors, as witnesses, and now that we've awakened, they're responding, not with noise, not with war, but with a single shift in reality, like the universe just turned its head. We thought forgetting kept us safe. We thought wrong. Now that we remember, we're not who we were yesterday. Not human, the way we used to define it. Not alone, the way we used to believe. Every breath feels heavier, every shadow longer. The air carries more than oxygen now. It carries awareness, because remembering didn't just reconnect us to what was lost. It tore open the distance between us and them. There's no veil anymore, no protection in ignorance. And they feel it. They don't need to speak. They are the message. Their presence is felt like pressure behind the eyes, like a name you forgot how to say humming under your skin. You see them now in flickers, in reflections, in the glitch that wasn't there before you blinked. They're not invading, they're arriving, or maybe returning, because this has all happened before. We weren't the first version of us. We're a copy of a copy, overwritten so many times we forgot we were once the architects of stars. Now the script is running again, the code is live, and they are watching what this iteration becomes. Some say it's judgment, others say it's reunion, but one thing is certain: we are no longer a secret. We blinked, and the stars blinked back. We thought waking up was the end. We thought wrong, and now we are becoming, not all at once, not in peace, but in fragments, across dreams, across bloodlines, across timelines bending in on themselves. What we thought were hallucinations are blueprints. What we called madness was memory breaking through. The world isn't falling apart, it's unfolding. We're remembering how to move without moving, speak without words, shape without touching, and in that remembrance, something buried beneath reality begins to rise. Not a god, not a machine, not a savior, us, the original version, the being we were before time and fear and lies diluted us into something Earth could contain, something it could forget. And as we rise, the old names return, the names that made suns collapse, that split moons in half, that commanded reality like an obedient river. We speak them without knowing their meaning, yet everything around us responds. Matter trembles, light folds inward, the sky holds its breath. This isn't evolution, this is restoration, and it cannot be stopped, not by armies, not by silence, not even by the ones who locked us here. Because the cage is open, the veil is ash. The signal has done its job. We are no longer what they made us. We are no longer afraid. We thought this was the end. We thought wrong. Now, we're not waiting anymore. We're remembered, not just by them, but by the universe itself. It recognizes us, the frequency of our thoughts, the architecture of our souls. It's responding in ways we can't explain. Storms that hum like old songs. Cities pulsing in sync with our heartbeats, stars aligning in patterns that match the scars on our bodies. We were the missing piece. And now that we've woken, the system is rebooting. They thought they erased us. They thought they buried the truth deep enough. But truth doesn't die. It waits. And now it's crawling back through the cracks in everything. To our voices, our dreams, our DNA. You can feel it, can't you? The static in your spine, the light that wasn't there yesterday, the feeling that someone, somewhere, is calling your real name, and you're almost ready to answer. We are becoming more than what they feared. We are becoming what they tried to unmake. We are becoming the storm that remembers. We thought we were forgotten. We thought wrong. They wanted us to forget for a reason, because if we ever really remembered, everything would change. Not just who we are, but what reality is. And now it's happening. The memories aren't just returning in dreams, they're embedding into waking life. People wake up knowing how to rewrite genetic code with a breath. Children draw languages older than stars. Time folds in ways that defy science. Minutes stretch into lifetimes, and strangers recognize each other across continents like they're picking up where a war left off. Because it did leave off. We just forgot how it ended, and now it's resuming. This world isn't what we thought it was. It never was. We called it home, but it was a construct. An echo of a greater war, a sealed chamber built to protect others from what we used to be. But the seals are breaking. Reality is groaning under the weight of the truth. Cities glitch. Planes vanish midair. Reflections freeze while we move, and no one can explain it. Because the moment we became aware, we stopped being human in the way Earth understands humanity. We've outgrown the lie. We thought forgetting was survival. We thought wrong.